Before I start, I just wanted to say that if you are epileptic, this game will probably kill you. And by watching this video, you waive all legal responsibility on my part. You've been warned. Jellico is one of those companies that I might not be too familiar with, but I have a feeling I've played a bunch of their games before. It's been almost 10 years since the company dissolved in 2014, and they have published a lot of games in the 4 decades they've been around. But Natsume? Not only are they still alive and kicking, they made some damn good games. Wild Guns, Pocky and Rocky, The Ninja Warriors. Solid games. So this was already going to be an interesting game. Even made more interesting considering the fact that this is just another Super Mario Bros. 2 reskin job. Yep, this game was originally called Tokyu Shirei Soul Brain, or Super Rescue Soul Brain, an early 90s Japanese tokusatsu series. But because we Americans have no idea what that shit is, they gave the whole game a facelift and called it Shatterhand. We replaced the dude in the robot suit with some guy in a jacket with shades and some robot arms. That's what it seemed like at first. But the actual story behind its development is a bit of a head-scratcher. Soul Brain came out first in October of 1991. Shatterhand came out in North America 2 months later. It's safe to assume that Soul Brain was repackaged as Shatterhand during the 2 months between releases. But here's where things get interesting. If we dig deep into Soul Brain CHR tiles, the memory that makes up the backgrounds and sprites, there are missing assets. Supposedly these assets were filled by boss sprites that would be used in Shatterhand, but were allegedly removed and replaced in Soul Brain. You get to fight these 2 girls in Soul Brain, but in Shatterhand, they are replaced by these 2 robots that transform into a giant worm. This is all available information on the Cutting Room Floor website. There'll be a link in the description. So if Shatterhand came out 2 months after Soul Brain, why do the Shatterhand bosses fill in these missing tiles? When did Shatterhand's development actually start? Maybe Natsume was working on an untitled game before being approached to make a licensed game instead. Unless I hear from a developer from Natsume, I can't confirm or deny what actually happened behind the scenes. What I can confirm is this ridiculous box art. They just don't make them like they used to. It looks like he's giving us the most intense bro fist we'll ever see. I would not reciprocate it though. Not because I don't respect the dude, but my entire arm will fold like an accordion if I did. Set in the year 2030. Oh shit, we got 7 years left. A cyborg army emerges to take over the world.
Of course!
General Gus Grover, nice alliteration, takes command of this renegade militia called Metal Command. During this invasion, a Bronx police officer named Steve Herman gets into an altercation with some members of Metal Command, and things get ugly. Steve loses both his arms, but he gains some new cybernetic arms courtesy of the Law and Order Regulatory Division, or LORD. There is a catch. He must work with LORD to take down Metal Command in return for his new appendages, and being that they share a common enemy, Steve doesn't hesitate to join forces. He is given the codename Shatterhand. This man is basically Jackson Briggs before Jackson Briggs.
This is not a brutality, this is a fatality.
The gameplay is pretty much the same as it was in Soul Brain. It's a platformer with beat-em-up elements thrown in. This game has that Mega Man feel to it, minus the Mega Buster. And speaking of Mega Man, Shatterhand also lets you select the next level after you finish the first level. The last level makes you refight some of the bosses too, and the stages are full of enemies and hazards. This game can get pretty tough. Sometimes I have to take my time and clear out enemies before I can progress. Trying to speedrun past everything doesn't seem like the best idea. Sometimes it's better to take it slow, which might become tedious depending on who you are. What's really neat is that you can hang on mesh walls and jump around on them. Although Super Mario World does this too and does it way better. You can't move at all when you hang on, which is a bummer considering the guy has 2 robot arms and should have no problem climbing. You have to jump to move around, and press up to grab on. Platforming off the walls takes a big level of finesse to pull off consistently. Sometimes they put a hazard on the ceiling in case you overshoot the jump. The levels themselves might as well be working for Metal Command 2, because some of these levels will kick your ass. The entrance to the anti-gravity level, for example, just likes to sucker punch you with falling rocks. Oh no! Falling rocks that explode. Must be that dynamite mountain I heard so much about. The filtration plant sucked. It's an ice level and a water level. The 2 most popular level designs that are unanimously loved by all. The whole second half of this level was just leaps of faith followed by more leaps of faith. How many spike wheels do you think is enough? What the hell kind of filtration are you people doing here? And the submarine. Wasn't a bad level. The thing that sucks about it is how they replaced the carnival level from the Japanese version. Now it's this sub full of weird aliens and shit. Why not just make a carnival full of aliens? Streets of Rage did it with no problem. After the first level, there weren't any easy levels. You get to play with gravity, ride the most brutal elevator in the world, and die a bunch of times because this game was rough. The first level does its job well. It teaches you the ropes. Not all of them, but you get to practice a little bit with Steve and his abilities. The first boss wasn't too hard either. He also kinda looks like M. Bison.
Of course!
No, you only get one per video. Get out of here, Bison. You give an evil dictator an inch and he takes a mile. Normally in these kinds of games, at least the ones I played, the level would be a bastard and a half, but the bosses would fold faster than Superman on Laundry Day. There were one or maybe two bosses that I fought where I was like, that's it. Some of them get crazy, and if you're not powered up, the fights could go on for minutes. Some of these just show no mercy. I have to get close to this thing to hurt it. God help me. This is madness. He's got this big-ass sword, these ground waves, and a whole bunch of spike wheels around him. And having the right weapons and the red jacket, or this other thing I'm going to talk about later, can end a boss in seconds. And killing a boss will put you into an epileptic coma. This is what that warning was for earlier. Remember, you waived any legal responsibility on my part long ago. You need those power-ups. You get them by teabagging this platform here, which should be the de facto way to get power-ups for every game. But the power-ups cost money. You get money from beating up enemies and punching boxes. Sometimes they have bags of gold that you have to punch instead of just walking up to it and collecting it, because it wouldn't be Shatterhand if punching wasn't the answer. I cannot put into words how much the grenade boxes piss me off. It's Revenge of Shinobi all over again. These things should be illegal. Imagine you wake up on Christmas morning and one of your gifts turns out to be a bomb.
Fucking bullshit!
When you pay the teabag tax, you can get a red vest which buffs your damage output. But if you get hit 3 times, you go back to your lame green drip. Some platforms replenish health, and the most expensive one gives you an extra life. Shatterhand is that kind of game where if you know what you're doing, then the game is awesome. If this is your first time playing, you're gonna have a bad time. This game is relentless. If you're stuck using basic Steve in his green jacket and no robot buddy by your side, this game will send you into therapy. Then when you think you're making progress with your therapist and everyone starts to accept you, your dog digs a hole in the backyard and finds your wife and son's dismembered bodies before the cops chase you through 5 states and you get stopped just before you reach the Mexican border. It's that fucking hard. Steve has one purpose in life. Punch everything. See an enemy? Punch him. Bags of money? Punch him. Wall? Punch it. Bullets? Dodging is for babies and liberals. Real men punch that shit. That's your normal attack for everything if you're not powered up. That's also your biggest weakness, because with flying enemies and ranged enemies, this becomes a nightmare. Some of these enemies take a lot of punches to kill, and there are times where you get overwhelmed pretty quickly. Your range is crap too. You have to get close to everything to kill it. I bump into shit all the time because I'm just not close enough to hit anything, or the enemy is positioned above or below you, or they put one of them on a platform that I need to get to. But because I can't reach them, I have to jump on the platform with them, and hilarity ensues. There's also this stupid thing that hangs on the ceiling and spawns flying enemies that go wherever you're standing. This thing shows up everywhere and it's a pain in the ass to deal with depending on where they put this thing, and how many enemies are on screen with it. Default Steve just feels incredibly underpowered, and for a guy whose punches are as strong as 100 strategic missiles, either Steve is full of shit or all these bosses are on future steroids.
6 hours later.
I did read the back of this box. It states that you need every megaton of that 100 missile strength to fight this cyborg army. Let me share some more of this sacred text with you. State-of-the-art graphics. This is a Nintendo Entertainment System game from 1991. The Super Famicom was already out. So was the Mega Drive and PC engine. State-of-the-art my ass. Game continue feature? That's not a feature, that's a requirement. There is one more feature I need to bring up. I discovered that there was a secret test mode that you access at the title screen. I'm not sure if this is a fun Easter egg, or the devs just forgot to take it out before release, but it's a neat little surprise nonetheless. There's sound and music tests, and you can jump straight into a boss fight. It's good for practice, especially the asshole with the sword, because I definitely don't have 2 hours of him kicking my ass on my hard drive. If you played this game a few times and get a better understanding of Shatterhand, this game can have some pretty deep mechanics. For a game about punching everything. These boxes contain alpha and beta symbols. Collect 3 of them and you get a satellite robot to assist you. Here's where things start to get interesting. Depending on which symbol you get, and what order you get them, it changes what ability your robot buddy has. He can shoot projectiles that bounce around, become a flamethrower, wield a sword, fire a laser, and much more. So try experimenting with different combinations, and memorize which ones you like the most. You got 8 different possibilities to choose from. There are situations in Shatterhand where having the right robot by your side can make a frustrating section a walk in the park. If you get 3 symbols in a different order, it changes whatever robot you were using. But what if you get the same 3 symbols again? I hate that I discovered this towards the end of my playthrough. You become this kick-ass fighting robot that destroys anything who looks at you funny. The robot suit lasts for about 15 in-game seconds, so you need to make it count. You also gain invincibility, but the timer goes down faster if you get hit. Man, do I wish this was longer. I can't go back to being the Green Jacket Man. But attaining this power is harder than it looks. You have to get the same 3 symbols twice, which doesn't sound so hard at first. But you have to keep your robot buddy alive too, because he can take damage from enemies and stage hazards. He can take a certain amount of hits before he starts flashing, which means he's near death. If he explodes, you have to play without the robot until you get him again. It sucks trying to keep him alive because he stays in front of you when you stop, so he constantly bumps into enemies because of it. And for a game where you need to be up close and personal to do damage, you can see how that can be a problem. And sometimes I forget the order of the symbols and I trade my cool robot for a crappy one. Shatterhand, or Soul Brain, came out in Japan in October of 1991, which is very late in the NES's lifespan, and 8-bit games from the early 90s just looked really good. Shatterhand is no exception. It has a kick-ass intro, good animations, parallax scrolling, 8-way level scrolling, which now that I think about it, not many NES games can do without some kind of screen transition, and a soundtrack that gives your Mega Man OSTs a run for their money. It's that 8-bit sounding music you know and love. Iku Mizutani wrote the music for Soul Brain, which would become the Shatterhand soundtrack. Hiroyuki Iwatsuki would do all the sound programming, so all the instruments and massive explosions you hear, those are all him. Turns out Mizutani worked on the original Metal Gear for the MSX, and he's done music for the King of Fighters series too, and the soundtrack for Shatterhand that slaps harder than Nicolas Cage. Would I consider Shatterhand to be a hidden gem of the 8-bit generation? It has a lot of things going for it. A great art style and the 80s action hero aesthetic. It feels like some short-lived Saturday morning action cartoon, and being that this was based off a short-lived tokusatsu show, it translated very well. It controls fine, but the wall climbing could be better in my opinion. And the last level was a bitch. This long shaft that I kept falling down from. It's like I'm playing Getting Over It, the game with some guy in a pot with a hammer. No! Ah! Oh yeah, almost forgot how you have to fight 3 bosses and make it to the final boss all in one go. Because they didn't bother to put checkpoints in the final level until after the 3rd boss. So when you die, you go straight back to the beginning and you get to fight all those bosses again. Aren't retro NES games just the best? And the final boss. I want to say he was pretty cool, but... yeah, this boss has some hitbox shenanigans that are just begging to be abused. And I found that out by complete accident. But despite its drawbacks, Shatterhand felt like it could have been a franchise. It could have separated itself from its Soul Brain roots and become its own thing. It could have been on the more advanced hardware like the Genesis or Super Nintendo or TurboGrafx-16. That would have helped Shatterhand considerably. By 1991, the NES was becoming obsolete. The 16-bit console wars were just taking off. Everyone was talking about the Genesis or the Super Nintendo in America. The NES, once the king of the home console market, with an impressive 90% market share on video games, the savior of the video game crash of the 1980s, would be forgotten over time. Even if great games were still being made for the system, the SNES had just made it to America in '91. Final Fantasy IV came out in '91. A Link to the Past came out in '91. Sonic the Hedgehog came out in '91. Streets of Rage came out in '91. Street Fighter II came out in '91. The competition was just way too fierce, and the interest in the NES was disappearing. I would still recommend Shatterhand to you. It's a short game, great visuals and music, fluid controls, and that classic NES difficulty you either love or hate. It may not be the best platformer on the NES, but it tried something different to set itself apart from the many jump and shoot games that came out before it, and the punching feels incredibly satisfying. If they fucked that up in a game called Shatterhand, I'd be telling you to play God Hand instead of this, because it's also a game about an amputee that gets superpowers. That game literally has blackjack and hookers, and chihuahua racing. What was I saying before? Oh yeah, you should play God Hand, it's fucking great.
Dragon kick your ass into the Milky Way. Milky Way. Don't act like you don't like the Bulbasaur. My arm, my arm, my arm, my arm, my arm, my arm. I summon up the powers of the God Hand.